Good evening and welcome. This is News First, where the people come first. I'm Azra Hassan. Let's start off with a look at your headlines for tonight.
News First headlines. Main sponsor.
Valuable Finance, best finance company.
Ratmalana Airport reopens its doors for international flights after 54 years. People on the streets in many areas against the rising cost of living. All set for the BIMSTEC summit. Indian External Affairs Minister to arrive tomorrow. Revelations on bilateral deals that jeopardize the sovereignty of the land and people of Sri Lanka. $1 billion loan from China to pay back Chinese loans. Government decides to take up debate on IMF report in Parliament. 2 Germans arrested for attempting to smuggle flora and fauna from the Singharaja forest.
News First headlines. Main sponsor.
Valuable Finance, best finance company.
On to your lead story now. The Colombo International Airport in Ratmalana resumed international operations after 54 years today.
The Colombo International Airport in Ratmalana was declared open in 1938. However, commercial flight operations were then moved to the Bandar Naik International Airport in 1968. Since then, the airport in Ratmalana had only been used for domestic flights and training purposes of the Air Force. But a Maldivian Airlines flight touched down at the airport at 8:45 this morning, ceremoniously marking the resumption of international flights after 5 decades. Minister Namal Rajapaksa declared open the new runway at the airport in line with this occasion. The Civil Aviation Authority handed over the International Airport Certification and Infrastructure Standard Certificate of the airport to Aviation and Aviation Services Limited today.
BI is becoming busy and we needed to look at the airport to connect the city of Colombo with the regional airports. So we are looking at the southern parts of India and of course our good friends here, Maldives.
This definitely will be a benefit, especially to the Maldivian community living here and the Maldivians who travel here for leisure. I think when you operate to a simple airport like this, the passenger process time will be less as well.
Minister Namal Rajapaksa spoke about new visas that are to be launched in the country.
We will be introducing a new visa scheme in our country called Paradise Visa for long-term residences. And also we are introducing a similar type of a visa for investment, especially on real estate, within Colombo city and out of Colombo. With Paradise Visa scheme, there will be a lot of travelers who wants to come to the inland airport rather than going into major international airports.
Maldivian Airlines is to operate 3 flights weekly to the Colombo International Airport.
We will be back after this short commercial break. Stay with News First.
Valuable Finance, best finance company.
Welcome back to the news. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar is expected to reach Sri Lanka tomorrow. Now, during his 3-day visit, the visiting minister will also attend the BIMSTEC summit in Colombo.
India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar will hold discussions with Sri Lankan officials during his visit. The Indian minister's visit comes a few days after China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi visited India. Jaishankar will declare open the Jaffna Cultural Centre during an online event from Colombo tomorrow.
India's External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar has also signed agreements on health and education with the Maldives.
India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar discussed regional security and maritime safety issues with Maldivian Foreign Minister Abdullah Shahid yesterday. He had also signed a pact connecting the Higher Education Network of Maldives and the National Knowledge Network of India. This was in addition to the agreement for reciprocal recognition of COVID vaccination certificates that will help facilitate easier travel between Maldives and India. The Indian minister visited Maldives ahead of his visit to Sri Lanka, which will begin tomorrow.
Against the backdrop of the India's External Affairs Minister's upcoming visit to Sri Lanka, details are now emerging on agreements signed between the two countries. Sri Lanka has found itself in a precarious position in terms of its sovereignty after signing 3 agreements with India, with another agreement due to be inked in future. These 4 agreements exert a potential threat to Sri Lanka's territory, sovereignty, government and the people, which are 4 vital components of a state. These agreements would see Sri Lanka receiving 3 Do-228 Dornier aircraft, a 4,000-ton floating dock, a maritime rescue coordination center and a digital personal identification system. The Sunday Times today reported that Sri Lankan defence analysts have warned that some of these proposals hastily rushed through the cabinet require deeper study in the national interest. Some of these agreements, including the one on the Maritime Rescue Coordination Centre, had been signed ahead of Finance Minister Basil Rajapaksa's visit to India. However, the conditions put forward by India over these projects, including the Maritime Rescue Coordination Centre and the floating dock, have raised many eyebrows. These agreements, signed in line with obtaining a $1 billion loan from India, have sparked concerns on whether they would affect the Sea of Sri Lanka and the country's sovereignty. The government had recently said India would provide 3 aircraft to Sri Lanka for maritime surveillance. But according to the agreement, Sri Lanka will have to purchase 1 aircraft on a credit line from India. 1 Dornier aircraft will be gifted by India to Sri Lanka. Documents pertaining to the deal show that India would loan 1 aircraft temporarily to Sri Lanka, as it would take 2 years to manufacture the aircraft. But Sri Lanka will have to purchase a 2nd Dornier aircraft through an Indian credit line. After providing the first aircraft on loan, a team comprising 5 Indian technical officers will arrive in Sri Lanka. They would train the Sri Lankan Air Force and Navy personnel on maintenance and handling. Documents reveal Sri Lanka has to provide the Indian officers with accommodation, medical, telephone, internet, transport and other facilities. Information gathered during maritime surveillance using the Dornier aircraft that would be given on loan would be a property of the Sri Lankan government. The agreement notes that no classified information shall be disclosed to any third party by the Indian government unless the Sri Lankan government authorizes it in writing. However, the DECA agreement signed on October 27, 2020 between US State Secretary Mike Pompeo and India's External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj allows classified information to be shared instantly. Isn't this an indication that India is being used to monitor Sri Lanka's waters? Although the cabinet paper for this agreement was submitted for approval on March 18th, Defence Secretary Kamal Gunaratne had signed some papers over the deal on March 15th. Sri Lanka has also agreed to accept a 4,000-ton floating dock worth $19.81 million as a gift from India. According to the agreement, the dock will be primarily stationed in Trincomalee and can be moved except to the Hambantota port by informing the Sri Lankan government. The Hambantota port is now in Chinese control. According to international agreements, Sri Lanka's search and rescue region extends beyond its exclusive economic zone in the Sea of Sri Lanka. Can this region be valued at a sum of $6 million? Isn't this similar to installing security cameras in Sri Lanka, while the footage can be monitored in India? Is the cabinet that is granting approval for these projects responsible for the country's future? Aren't the signatories to these agreements giving away the future of this country with a simple stroke of a pen? The Hindi newspaper has reported that India has asked Sri Lanka to exercise caution and prevent casualties while cracking down on fishing boats of Indian fishermen. India has suggested the use of a paramilitary force instead of the Navy to deal with Indian fishermen in the Sea of Sri Lanka. These matters had been discussed at the 5th meeting of the bilateral joint working group on fisheries that was held virtually on Friday. Sri Lanka's Secretary to the Minister of Fisheries, R.M. Ratnayaka, and India's Fisheries Secretary, Jatrendra Bernard Swain had led the delegations. India had called on Sri Lanka to approach the fisheries issue in a humanitarian way in line with the clauses of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. Both countries had agreed that the use of force could not be justified under any circumstances and reiterated the importance of humane treatment of all fishermen. In a statement, the Indian High Commission in Colombo said Sri Lanka had voiced concerns over the methods used by Indian fishing vessels. The Sri Lankan delegation had pointed out that, quote, it is imperative for the two countries to work together in drawing up effective measures to mitigate the loss of livelihood, unquote. India had assured Sri Lanka of its assistance to help Indian fishermen switch to longline fishing. This is in addition to the education, financial support and guidance given to them. Sri Lanka's Secretary to the Ministry of Fisheries, R.M. Ratnayaka, told News First that a proposal had not been put forward on the use of a paramilitary force to deal with Indian fishermen.
Sri Lanka has condemned the recent attack on oil facilities in Saudi Arabia on Friday.
Fuel tanks at state oil producer Saudi Aramco's North Jeddah bulk plant were attacked by missiles on Friday. Sri Lanka's foreign ministry said these attacks have not only placed civilian lives at risk but also undermines world energy security. Yemen's Houthi rebels backed by Iran had claimed responsibility for the attack. In response, a Saudi-led coalition fighting Houthi rebels launched airstrikes in Yemen. This includes port and electricity and fuel installations and military sites.
News First with the people.
This evening, our very own Faraz Shaukat Ali met with some people involved in a silent protest against the mounting issues faced by them. Now, the full edition of the Newsline special can be viewed on our YouTube channel, Newsfirst.lk. Protests were held in many areas opposing the rising cost of living today. Now, as mentioned earlier, silent vigils were held in Colombo and its suburbs this evening.
Protesters without political affiliations carried out placards and candles as they held a protest in Rajagiriya today. The demonstrations were held against the mounting issues faced by the people.
The appalling state of affairs, it's mainly due to poor governance by our governing bodies which has brought us to this state. People are suffering.
What we are looking for is actually a clear plan how to get Sri Lanka out of this mess. Right now there is no cohesive plan. We don't know where we are headed.
A similar vigil was held in Jaila today. Frustrated citizens also held silent protests in Mount Lavinia and Kohuwala.
They are not concerned about us. They are only concerned about themselves. They will survive. What about us? Aren't they concerned about us? They talk big.
Three-wheel drivers participated in a protest in Nitambua against the rising cost of living that has made lives unbearable. People in Kuliapitiya held a protest against the rising cost of goods, including fuel, gas and milk powder.
We can't even cook meals for our children because it's expensive. If they can't run this country properly, they must resign and allow someone capable to take over. They must think about innocent people like us as well. Don't they understand this? Why are they acting like fools?
The Sinhala and Tamil New Year falls in April. People don't have food. There are more than 100 traders. They can't transport goods because there is no petrol or diesel. A silent protest was held at the Periyamulla junction against the rising cost of living. Area residents and civil activists attended the demonstration. The president says he understands these problems. We can imagine what he understands about that. We feel the president must resign. There is no alternative to save this country. People must be able to oppose this if they want. It wasn't the people but the government that got us into this crisis. Therefore, the government should relieve us from this. They must find a solution. A tense situation arose at a Sipetco filling station at the Bibila town today. Farmers had not been able to purchase fuel required by their machines despite standing in queue for 2 days. They accused workers at the filling station of charging more to pump fuel to fill the full tank of vehicles. Police and army officers had intervened to bring the situation under control. Our correspondent reported that fuel was sold to people with cans at a maximum cost of 1,500 rupees. A long queue was seen at a Sipetco filling station in the Anuradhapura town. Our correspondent reported that people had been in queue since 4 this morning. Our correspondent reported that the filling station had sold fuel up to 10,000 rupees for buses and heavy vehicles. The sale of fuel was limited to 3,000 rupees for other vehicles. Diesel was not sold at any Sipetco filling station in the Badulla town. A long queue of vehicles was seen in the area today. A long queue for fuel was seen at the Mathura town today as well. I've never seen anything like this in my life. We elected this government, but no government has been like this since 1948. The regional manager has instructed us to avoid selling fuel to people with cans. We will only sell to those who have obtained permission from him. We have put up a signboard asking people to obtain the permission of the general manager. Small-scale fishermen say they have been badly affected by the shortage of kerosene. Small-scale fishermen have been badly affected because they don't have kerosene for their boats. Not a single drop of kerosene was available along the Chirac coast for about a week. They say there is fuel. Where can we find it? None of the filling stations have enough fuel. How can fishermen buy kerosene? They say they will sell about 20 litres, but we need about 100 litres for a day to go to sea. We won't be able to return with a small quantity.
Long queues for gas cylinders were seen in many areas today as well. This was the situation at the Badulla town. Our correspondent reported that people were in queues since this morning. The gas dealership had received cylinders after several days.
The president doesn't govern this country. It is the black market traders and businessmen who run the country. The people are suffering after voting for the sheep in wolves' clothing.
People in Galle were seen in queues to purchase gas cylinders today. People in Babbegama were not able to purchase gas cylinders since this morning. But our correspondent reported that many people had to return home empty-handed.
We were told that people used to stand in queues in the 1970s, but we are facing a similar situation today.
A 3,600 metric ton consignment of gas reached the country today. Litrogas Lanka Limited Chairman Teshara Jasingh has said the consignment will be unloaded after conducting the relevant tests. He said more than 100,000 gas cylinders will be distributed today as well.
Gum at the V4's volunteers handed over bottles of chilled water to help those standing in queues for the 7th day today. Bottles of water were distributed among people in the Colombo and Galle districts. Several donors also joined the distribution process today. Gum at the V4's volunteers collected back the bottles with the aim of avoiding pollution.
The Ceylon Electricity Board says power cuts will be imposed tomorrow as well.
According to the power cut schedule of the Ceylon Electricity Board, groups falling under P to W will face a 2-hour and 15-minute power cut between 8:30 a.m. and 5:30 p.m. and a 1-hour and 50-minute power cut between 5:30 p.m. and 11 p.m. Groups A to L will face a 3-hour and 20-minute power cut between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. and 1-hour and 40-minute power cut between 6 p.m. and 11 p.m. The Public Utilities Commission decided to increase the duration of power cuts today, citing that the electricity demand had gone up. Why did the electricity demand increase during the weekend? The Public Utilities Commission said electricity demand had gone up due to the dry weather and also because factories had operated more than usual. Its chairman Janaka Ratnayaka said hydropower stations can generate electricity for only about 20 days. He pointed out that thermal power plants required about 3,500 metric tons of diesel daily to generate electricity. The chairman said that the power supply could be disrupted further if power plants don't receive enough diesel or if there is a mechanical failure in any other turbines.
While the general public continue to suffer due to the fuel, gas and the power crisis, paddy harvests have dropped in many areas across the island.
Farmers point out that their harvest has dropped significantly due to the fertilizer crisis. Several farmers in Polonnarua, Pulastipura and Onegama have abandoned their fields without even harvesting as they can't afford fuel, and close to half of their crops have been destroyed due to the lack of fertilizer. Farmers point out that they don't even have sufficient harvest for their own consumption. There was never a time when our farmlands were unfairly destroyed like this. Some farmers have abandoned their fields as they can't afford the cost of machines and labor. We don't have an income of even 25%. This is the reality. The paddy harvest will next be taken to rice mills. Small and medium-scale rice mill owners spoke about the issues that they confront as well. When the dollar was 200 rupees, state institutions had imported 400,000 metric tons of rice into the country. These stocks of rice came out of the port at a price of 100 rupees. Now they are being sold to customers at 160, 175 or 180 rupees. These imported stocks of rice are being packaged like local produce in Polonnarua, Anuradhapura, Kurnagala, Gampaha and the Batiklo districts. This rice is being repackaged as local rice. Some racketeers are maintaining a profit about 50 rupees and selling rice to the public. These ministers have not been able to bring this racket under control. This is extremely sad. We feel this is the second chapter of the sugar scam. A kilo of the best quality Nadu rice is about 200 rupees. That means the 5 kilo pack is 1000 rupees and the 10 kilogram packet is 2000 rupees. For Nadu white kekulu and red kekulu, a kilo of samba rice is about 210 rupees. The minister and officials in charge of consumer protection are sleeping. While the effects of the fertilizer crisis are being felt among farmers and the consumers, those in the plantation sector are also feeling the blow. Tea is one of Sri Lanka's major foreign revenue earners. However, tea harvests have recorded a 13-year low in yield due to the fertilizer crisis. The reduction in yield, coupled with the exponential rise in the fuel, packaging and other operational costs, have led to an increase in the price of Sri Lankan tea. Experts point out that the rising cost of tea in Sri Lanka could lead to buyers moving to other suppliers from countries in the region.
India has tightened security along the Kerala coast amidst suspicion that refugees from Sri Lanka may enter their country.
Indian media reported that India's state of Kerala has received intelligence warnings that people fleeing Sri Lanka, which is hit by an economic crisis, might sneak into the country by sea. Accordingly, the Indian Navy, Coast Guard, Coastal Police and the Fisheries Department have intensified patrolling along the 583-kilometer Kerala coast. At least 2 batches of refugees from Sri Lanka had already fled to Tamil Nadu illegally.
News First with the people.
The government has decided to hold a debate on the report of the International Monetary Fund or the IMF on Sri Lanka. Chief Government Whip Minister Johnston Fernandez said the Parliament had decided to hold the debate within the first week of April. Parliamentarians from several parties, including the United National Party leader Ranil Wickremesinghe, had called on the government to hold a debate on the report. Opposition leader Sajith Premadasa says Sri Lanka has been caught in a circle of strife. He made these remarks at a meeting in Suryawaba.
We are now caught in a never-ending circle of strife. We can't import fuel because there are no dollars. Hydropower plants are not running because of depleting water levels. Therefore, we need fuel for thermal power plants. We don't have dollars to import fuel. As a result, we have to stay in the darkness for several hours. How can factories operate if there is no electricity? Then we will be unable to export goods. When we can't export goods, other countries will capture those export markets. Winning those markets back won't be easy. They won't give up. This is the IMF report on Sri Lanka. The entire report contains 94 pages. Some might agree or not. The government has responded to this in a single-page statement. This gives you a clear understanding of the government's intelligence and ability.
Two German nationals were arrested for the possession of several valuable plants and animals endemic to Sri Lanka.
The German nationals had entered the Singharaja forest along the Kurulagala entrance path with a tour guide. The police was tipped off by the tour guide that the German nationals were collecting animals and plant species from the Singharaja forest. Officers attached to the Mirissa and Kudawa wildlife officers had later searched the hotel in Kurulagala Deniyaya, where the German nationals were staying.
Transport, reptiles, fish and other animals, live animals of coming. Satun විශේෂයෙන් ආකර්ෂණය කරන ඒවා. ඒකට මේ වර්ණ සහිත ආලෝක සහිත විදුලි බල්බ පාවිච්චි කරනවා.
Newsfirst inquired on this incident from the Director General of Wildlife, Chandana Surya Bandara. He said a special investigation into the incident has been launched by the department. Crabs, cockroaches, species of frogs endemic to Sri Lanka, insects, orchids and many different types of plants that they took from the Singharaja forest and the Thangal coast were seized. We were able to seize many valuable plants and animal species that were to be smuggled to Germany. The two German nationals who were produced before the Morowaka Magistrates Court today were remanded until the 11th of next month.
Former governor and leader of the National Unity Alliance, Azad Saleh, says that the proposed new electoral system by the Parliamentary Select Committee seeks to throw out all minor parties from the Sri Lankan political sphere.
In a communique, leader of the National Unity Alliance, Azad Saleh, pointed out that the government is attempting to secure 35% of the votes and rise to victory. The National Unity Alliance points out that this proposed electoral system will create divisions among communities in the country. The former governor in his communique highlighted the need for all political parties in the country to work towards defeating this proposed electoral system and take steps to protect the proportional representative system.
The 31st Interact District Conference was held in Waskadua today.
The Interact movement, a branch of Rotary International, held its 31st District Conference today. The theme of this year's conference was Persisting Impediment, Pursuing Infinity. Executive Group Director of the Capital Maharaja Group, Shivan Daniel and Nil Shanidi Silva, graced the event as keynote speakers.
I had two major operations, one for my cleft palate and one for a hole in the heart. I had a problem with my hips. They were getting dislocated, so they put plaster and braces on my legs. I couldn't walk for a long time and had to learn to walk again. Because of my cleft palate, I started talking only in grade 1. My hobby is designing, and now I am working on releasing my own clothing line.
Interactors and several other special invitees attended the event.
In news we just received, Indian Minister of External Affairs Dr. S. Jaishankar arrived in Sri Lanka a short while ago. During his 3-day visit, the visiting minister will also attend the BIMSTEC summit starting in Colombo tomorrow. Dr. S. Jaishankar will hold discussions with Sri Lankan officials during the visit. Dr. Jaishankar will also declare open the Jaffna Cultural Center during an online event from Colombo tomorrow. And that's a wrap of this edition of Primetime News. For the Newsfirst team, I'm Azra Hassan. Take care and good night.